honored that both filmmakers are here in the room, as well as with some of their teams and crews. So we're going to be showing two films. Ang Nai Waipo first by Wang, and then The Last Repair Shop. Ben Proudfoot is here, and both of them would like to come and say hello to you. But I also wanted to ask you to please turn off your devices, and please join us afterwards for a conversation. It will be hosted by one of the executive producers of The Last Repair Shop, Jason Spingarn-Koff. And he is here, and he'll be joining us right after the screening. So please welcome Ben and Sean. Thank you very much.
Sorry. Hi everyone, I'm Sean. Thank you so much for being here. This is a really special screening. Obviously, to screen with Ben anytime is really special. We kind of go way back now. We're good friends. We have so many mutual friends. And we've screened together a couple times already, so it's always a joy. I'm from the Bay Area. We shot this in the Bay Area in Fremont. And so, you know, just getting to screen in the Bay Area for you guys is really special. My film is called Nai Nai Gan Waipo. You'll see in the film that Nai Nai is my paternal grandmother, Waipo is my maternal grandmother. We shot this in sort of like COVID era 2021. And it's really a love letter to them. They're kind of like the purest form of joy in my life. And it's kind of just a portrait of them and kind of getting to share my love with them for you guys. And so I really hope you enjoy it. Thank you, Sean.
Thank you all. Yes, give him a round of applause. And his film is premiering at Sundance in January. Give him another feature film. Thank you all for coming. Our film is called The Last Repair Shop. I co-directed it with Chris Bowers, who couldn't be here tonight but really wanted to, and he also wrote a lot of the score you'll hear. It's about the LAUSD musical instrument repair shop, a few hours south. And you'll meet amazing people who make music happen in Los Angeles for our public school students. I'm from Nova Scotia, but this movie would not be possible without a lot of folks from the Bay Area. In particular, we have our executive producer here, Jane Solomon, who's amazing, and this movie would not be possible without, and also our editor, Nick Wright. His parents are here too, so without them, it would just be raw footage, unedited. So hope you enjoy both movies. The program will last about an hour, I guess, between the two of them, and then we'll come back for a Q&A. So great, enjoy the show.
Thank you. And then Jason will be up on stage, and he'll bring both of them back after. Thank you.
Spingarn-Koff. Very pleased to be invited to have this Q&A with these two incredible filmmakers. Let's have Ben and Sean please come to the stage. I think it's rare to have two short documentaries that are so uplifting. Yeah. Often documentaries, I don't know if this is working. Okay. Often documentaries are so, frankly, depressing. They take on a lot of very important issues, but each of yours, I think, is a kind of love letter. I know, Sean, your film's been described as a love letter to your two grandmas, and Ben's is kind of a love letter to music and the people who love music and make music possible for children. I'd love to just first hear a little bit about the origin of each film. Sean, can you talk a bit about the process of enlisting your grandmothers and how this came about?
Enlisting. Thank you so much for moderating this, Jason. Thank you guys again for being here. Yeah, I guess, well, not to ramble too much, but it all started back in 2018. I was spending Christmas break with my grandparents, or my grandmothers, back at home, and I decided to make a Christmas card with them. And I shot this thing in like 2 hours, and it's basically, we call them skits in our film, these sort of like the arm wrestling type of things. And it was this like 1-minute video where, you know, Waipo's trying to feed me blueberries, and I'm like, no, go away, you're so annoying. She's like, no, eat, you know, being very like Asian grandmother. And I'm like, stop, you're so annoying. And then she looks in the camera and like slaps me, and then looks at Nai Nai, and they like, you know, kind of like have a plan. And then it's just like 30 seconds of chaos where they like tie me up to a chair and slap me, like, spank me. They're doing the worm. It's just chaos. It's probably the most fun I've ever had making anything. And since then, I was like, oh, I want to do something else with them. And we sent it as a Christmas card. Everyone's like, this is your best work you've ever done. And so in the back of my head, I was like, I want to do something else with them. Like, that was just fun. It was really fun. And it felt like just like a seed of something. And then kind of what I said earlier in my intro, in 2021, after 5 or 6 years of living in New York City, I decided to move back to LA where I went to school. But in between, I moved home to the Bay Area and was there for a few months, and it was the longest time that I had been home since leaving for school. It's the longest time that I've gotten to spend with my grandmothers together under one roof, because they didn't always, live together. And again, it was kind of coincided with this time in, where there were a lot of anti-Asian hate crimes kind of happening in the world, but also a lot in the Bay Area. So it was that kind of feeling of just extreme anger when I would just go online and kind of look at the headlines, look at kind of seeing people attack people in that community that they kind of come from, and then feeling extreme joy hanging out with them. And again, we all kind of grow up and grow older, and getting to a point where I was like, oh, like, they're really old. I'm never gonna, I don't think, have this experience again in my adult life. This time I get to spend with them and see them day to day. And so it was kind of those three things coming together to be like, well, we should just make something. Like, let's just try and make something that was a container to capture their existence and their humanity and their joy and their silliness, but also without ignoring the sort of like the themes of mortality and things that they probably think about, towards the end of life. Sam likes to say that, like, what really excited him about this film is making a film about old age and end of life, but feel very youthful and young, which is kind of what they feel like.
I think you really capture that. Yeah, it is so full of youth as well as wisdom and age, and it's really remarkable. Before we go to you, Ben, how are your grandmothers? Are they still with us?
They are. They really wanted to come today, but it's also my dad's birthday, and so we're like, all right, you guys go celebrate. I'll join you guys later. But yeah, they're great, and they're thrilled about like just getting to screen it. They're like, oh my God, we're like in another movie theater. I'm like, yeah.
Incredible. They're amazing. Ben, what was the spark of inspiration, or the kind of burning thing that was within you to decide to make this film? Also with Chris, your co-director.
Yeah. Awesome. So we, Jeremy Lambert, who's a producer on this movie, read and sent me an article about the repair shop. And it was maybe 10 years before we started this. We were working on this for 4 years, so it's like a real thrill to be able to show it to an audience. But it was an article about how there was a big backlog at the repair shop, and that there wasn't enough funding, and that there were problems with getting the instruments repaired quickly enough to get them back. And I think it was kind of like a compound reaction. One was, I can't believe that Los Angeles is one of the last cities in the United States that offers free and freely repaired instruments. And it's like, I think like 90% of free and freely repaired instruments are in LA. There's a lot, the other places that have it are smaller. So it made me proud to live in Los Angeles, and sometimes it's hard to find those things in LA, or at least it seems like it. And then I was working on a movie with Chris, my friend, who we were making a film about his grandfather called A Concerto as a Conversation. And which is one of the most joyful things you can do is to make a film about a grandparent and pay tribute to somebody who really doesn't expect to become a movie star. I asked Chris if he knew about the repair shop, because he's an LAUSD kid who went on to go to Juilliard and become a renowned film composer, etc. And he had no idea. And so we became partners in crime to make another kind of like grand thank you tribute film. And I love craftspeople. I've been making films about craftspeople for years. And I love music, and Chris has music in his bones, and that was the inspiration. Was we wanted to pay tribute to these four people, but also by extension everybody who is unsung and unthanked in educating the next generation, which is millions of people all around the world.
Yeah, I think you for sure found cinematic gold in this repair shop that few people have ever heard of or had access to. I'd love to just talk a minute about the filmmaking process. I think both of these are just impeccably crafted. I think anyone in the audience who's a lover of film and cinema will be amazed at truly how great a command you each have of the film language. And I was just curious how, as directors, you manage to balance the control, the discipline of lining up each of these shots, and there's a lot of control that happens with the spontaneity of allowing unexpected moments and this real humanity to emerge. How do you navigate that balance?
Yeah, well, that's a great, that is the toggle between spontaneity and control and the planned and the unplanned. I think for us it was very much driven by the interviews to begin with. And that's the craziest part of this project, is when we went in there, they didn't want to participate because the last time they had sort of opened the shop up to the public, they got this article about how there was a big backlog and that reflected badly on them, they thought. So they all said no initially, and I had to make my big campaign speech about why they should let us make this movie. And they were all sort of standing there with their arms crossed, and the 4 people that raised their hand at the end when I did my Jerry Maguire, who's with me? 4 people raised their hand, and those are the 4 people in the movie. And you watch it, and most people come up and say, wow, how did you find these people? And you must have interviewed all of them and picked the best stories. But fate stepped in, or maybe just that they knew they had a story to tell. So that kind of governed the process. And then in terms of the improvisatory piece, both Chris and I was a magician as a teenager. Chris was a piano player, jazz piano player. So both of us sort of come from the world of you work as hard as you can, you practice as hard as you can, you know everything there is to know about your craft and your art. But then when you get there, you improvise. And you kind of follow the room and you throw the plan out and you say, okay, why don't we make this whole thing about his Elvis thing? What if that's his whole thing is all about the Bodie Mountain Express? So we're very comfortable with that, and we chase those opportunities down at the same time, I guess, as trying to, impose the plan. You got to throw it away too.
Yeah, life is often more interesting than you can imagine, which I think is what makes documentaries so wonderful. And Sean, what about you? How do you, as a director, navigate the balance between control and improvisation or the unexpected?
Yeah, I think for this film especially, and well, I think one thing about Ben's films, not just this film, all his documentaries have such a cinematic language to them that I think is spearheading something. But I think for our film, and I've worked with Sam Davis, who shot this. Ben has worked with him before too. We've been working together for almost 10 years, and we've done all sorts of things: documentaries, narrative shorts, music videos. I think we both have this sort of ethos where it's almost when we do documentaries, let's almost try and bring a narrative craft to it, and vice versa with narratives, let's try and bring some documentary spontaneity. And I think when we think of this film, it is that sort of balance of there is a documentary that we're making, but there are also these sort of not necessarily scripted moments, but narrative moments, where we're staging and not really blocking, but the arm wrestling thing, for example. It's very much let's film an arm wrestling match. So let's film a single, let's film a wide. There's sort of a language to it. And I think with this film particularly, it was that sort of mix of I had been living with them for a few months already and being okay, I want to have this sort of observational, almost verite approach where it's what are the memories that I want to look back on? Well, I go and I see White she's just washing the dishes. It's part of her daily routine. What are the these mundane, almost portraits? I want that to just look back on and remember. And so the way I don't think I could have articulated it back then while we were shooting, but I think it was kind of in the back of my head. And then it was the thing that was the North Star while we were editing, was sort of there in this film. There's the movie of their lives and then the movie that they're in. And so the movie of their lives is a sort of very verite, grounded, mundane, observational, quiet, still moments. And then the movie that they're in is this sort of like, let's use movie language, let's use jump cuts and music and style, you know, make it stylized, make it heightened, and have those two worlds kind of like come together. And so that kind of dictated the way that we kind of, you know, shot things, staged things, and also we didn't have a ton of money to make it to begin with, so a lot of it was kind of like, okay, where are we going to put the camera? We can probably just put it right here.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Was there any other creative challenge that you faced as you were putting them together in the editing, perhaps? I'm kind of amazed, Sean, at what you were able to fit into about 16 minutes. It's impressive that you were able to fit in so many layers and themes. But I was curious, as each of you was working through how to structure these films, was there one challenge that you particularly had to overcome? Sean, why don't we start with you?
Well, I'm excited to hear Ben's answer for this one. It's so meticulously crafted. I think, well, Ben, you used to edit your own stuff too, right? Or
say that again?
like in the past, you used to edit your own stuff too. I think like, I mean, I don't want to speak for Ben, but I think so much when you're making documentaries, you're like, your editor brain is also on, and so, you know, our film came together like really organically, and when we started shooting, it wasn't like, okay, we know the last shot, we know the first shot. It was just, the North Star was just like, okay, let's just, we know we want to capture everything. We wanted to make a film that could have this tone about like farts and silly laughing and talking about death and mortality. And so how do we do that? You know, and so we didn't have the answer when we started shooting. We shot for maybe about a week. But again, your editor brain is kind of on, and so when we shot the opening shot of this movie of them kind of waking up in the morning saying good morning, there was just like, Sam and I looked at each other, we're like, that's the opening shot. You know, so it was like, okay, well, I'm pretty sure that's the opening shot. And so like, where does it go from there? And so it was like, oh, I think there's, you know, like, well, we need to introduce these two women, otherwise like, what are we watching? So it was like, as you're shooting, you're like, okay, I think there's gonna be like this opening montage. And again, when we did the interviews, it comes like, okay, there's a lot, they talk about everything, so there's kind of a blueprint there. And then, you know, they kind of started talking about like, oh, when you leave, it's you know, very, essentially the movie of their lives is over, and it goes back to the sort of observational, mundane version of their lives. And I was like, oh, that seems like an ending to the movie, because like in my real life, like I do have to leave and go back to sort of my life. And so obviously we have the sort of like rug pull version of that in the movie, so it doesn't end on like the super sad note. But as we were shooting, I was like, oh, those are, I think I know the opening and I think I know the ending, you know? And then it became like, okay, well, how do we just make, what goes in the middle? And that became a, you know, long editing process because it kind of ebbs and flows. I think that answers the question.
Yeah, no, that's really interesting.
I just want to say before I forget that I've seen this film a few times, but I really paid attention this time to when she's reading her old friends' phone numbers. That scene, it's just a short scene. That's such a beautiful, there's something about that, like that she's reading, she's not like looking through a photo album, but she's looking at the phone numbers to jog her memory that I just, and it's all dark and the lit magnifying glass. It's just like such a beautiful scene. Anyway, I just wanted to say that. Our film was the structure was kind of set because we had the 4 characters, and we knew that there was a built-in surprise of Steve himself being the piano technician. So he could introduce them from the tickets, which was something we discovered, like, well, how does it work? How do the instruments come in? Well, they come, and they have a ticket associated with it. We keep the tickets, and where do you keep the in this drawer, okay, pull them out, and then some of them are written by kids, and some of them are really, you know, the thing falling off, and his, you know, tender little care, or whatever, all those characters. So we got him to read a bunch of them, and that became an obvious kind of like, you know, string to hang everything else on, and had that nice surprise of Steve being the end, where you thought, oh, he's just a manager, but then he kind of comes in for the big emotional finale. So that kind of came together there. I think the big thing that was hard for me and Chris and Nick, the editor, who worked on this for a year. I mean, you know, during the pandemic, this was like, you know, didn't have all the B-roll, so a lot of it was just cutting to like stock footage and things. Was trying to get it down in length. We knew that we didn't want to make it a feature. You know, we're a short documentary, you know, company, and we wanted to make it accessible and sort of viewable on the internet. And so trying to keep it emotional while not cutting anybody from the movie and not cutting anything. And then the kids were just so charming, so we were always up against that 40-minute limit, which is unusual I'm usually making 10, 15-minute films. But this just it had a lot of meat in there that we were contending with. And then we came up with the idea of the big grand finale. So we needed to find, you know, 4 minutes somewhere else, right?
For the orchestra, the kind of fantasy.
The fantasy,
orchestra.
the big ending, which as soon as we kind of came up with that idea, we're like, we gotta do it. We gotta find every session musician in Los Angeles who graduated from LAUSD. We gotta track them down, beg them to come play. We've gotta get one of the big studios gotta give us the room for free. We gotta find an LAUSD connection everywhere. And we just, you know, the team just produced the hell out of that end thing, and it looks like $1 million, but it's not. It's a lot of LAUSD love, is what it is. Yeah.
It's pretty epic. Are there any other stories of the kids you'd like to share?
Oh man, so many.
I'm curious too if they've seen the film.
Oh, they have, and
what kind of impact it's having.
Yeah, I mean, I think they love being movie stars. They've seen it a few times. Portia, especially the violinist, is just like soaking it all up and really loves the experience of being really the face of the movie, because she's kind of like the poster. Her leaning back and laughing is like our iconic image of the joy that music brings. But the thing is with the young people, they are going through very difficult things. Like both Portia and Amanda, the pianist, both lost a parent since we filmed this. Mm-hmm. And to just, you know, and I lost my dad 2-3 years ago, and that was hard as an adult. But to imagine thinking through them, you know, and them being so resilient and so thinking about it so complexly and talking about mental health or, you know, whatever, I was just like, man, I don't think I was this advanced as a 10-year-old, as a 14-year-old. So I've just been very impressed by their maturity and their silliness and you know, their love of music is just re-inspires Chris and I every time we get together with them for a screening or whatever. Yeah.
Well, I'm so glad their stories will now be seen by a lot of people. It's wonderful that you made these very indie films. I think when someone sets out to make a short documentary, they don't expect the whole world to see them. But what's wonderful is that you did find pretty interesting distributors. I'm somewhat subjective since I work, or I'm helping LA Times with the Short Talks program, which is how I got involved in the film. But I'd love to hear a little bit about what it's been like working with Searchlight and Disney and LA Times, and what kind of impact that's had on the films.
I mean, it's been amazing. You know, it's like kind of what you said. You know, we're making short docs, which is kind of like indie by nature, and so, you know, having Disney come on board and just kind of like support the film and getting to screen it. You know, actually getting to screen it in a theater, getting to kind of share it with people, finding an audience that's bigger than anybody who we could have ever dreamed of. You know, like the entire journey of this short so far has really, bye-bye. Been really special and a dream, and just like, you know, we were talking outside earlier, Jason, about like we got to premiere it at South by Southwest. We won the Grand Jury Award and Audience Award, and it was, all of a sudden it was like, okay, this is enough. You know, it was like, whoa. And then so like we've gone to, you know, screen it with Ben in like proper, you know, like screenings like this, and that was, you know, I don't think that would have been able, you know, to happen without support like Disney. And you know, they're just really, you know, I think we all have this shared goal of just like, let's just get the word out, you know, like let's just share this movie with as many people as we can. And so it's been really, you know, all of this is just like very lovely.
It's been amazing, both with the LA Times and Searchlight. And I have to pinch myself every time I hear that Alfred Newman bum ba da ba at the beginning of the movie. It's like, I can't believe that. Somehow it feels like we're robbing a bank or something. Yeah, it's been great, and I love it because it's, you know, short documentaries as yet are not a profitable venture at all.
Yeah.
And so for the Walt Disney Company, through Disney or through Searchlight, to be inspired to get behind distributing these little films that started with us, you know, having an idea and, you know, dragging the movie along for many years sometimes with out of our own passion. It's the honor of a lifetime, I think, to have them be viewed on, you know, Disney Plus and in movie theaters. I mean, that's what you want as a filmmaker, but I also think it speaks to the growing renaissance and interest in the format of the short documentary in general.
Yeah, I'm so glad there is an ability now for the world to see these films. Are they, yours is out, and also is yours on Disney Plus now?
Not yet. I think early 2024.
Okay.
Early 2024.
Well, congratulations again. They're both wonderful, and I'm so glad you were able to share this with San Francisco. Thank you.
Thank you guys for coming.
Thank you very much for joining us. The filmmakers will be outside for a few minutes, so you're welcome to chat with them. Thank you, Jason. Really, that was so good. And if you haven't seen Ben's other films, New York Times, wonderful film that he won an Oscar for, and another one about the amazing Patsy Mink, first Congresswoman. So thank you.
Oh.
Thank you, Sean.
He was part of that? Really? Yeah.